A Karen on a plane thinks that she is entitled to a first-class upgrade for free after booking the aisle seat and the window seat, but not the middle seat, and then getting furious that she didn't get the middle seat included because she had the aisle and the window. The middle seat was my seat. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. Due to a new procedure in process at work nobody cares about, I booked a flight to my conference destination really late. All that was left were middle seats, or ponying up personally, for an upgrade which wasn't going to happen for a relatively short flight. Out in the boarding area, they announced many times that it was a full flight and kept begging people to gate check their bags. It was not subtle. After they let all the military, first class, frequent flyers, and blah 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 blah, more time needed people board, my group got to plot down the jetway. Once we got to the plane, I could see my fate before me. A wild Karen was sitting in an aisle seat. The middle was piled with Karen crap. A backpack, electronic devices, stuffed animals, snacks, and a miniature Karen was over in the window seat, happily kicking the empty seat in front of her so hard it was visibly shaking. That's, I count the rows, definitely mine. When I got to the row, I pointed to the middle seat to indicate that it's mine. Karen did not budge or move a single thing from her crop henge. I tried again with the whole, sorry, that's my seat routine. She snapped at me and said, you sit somewhere else. I say, I can't do that. It's a full flight. This is my assigned seat. Well, Karen wasn't having that. Did I know what kind of day she'd had? It had started the day before. Their flight was diverted. They missed their connection. They slept in the airport overnight. They just needed a little space. Sit somewhere else, is basically what she told me, and she shoved her knees up full against the seat in front of her, blocking my way before she loaded it with Karen Cruft in the middle seat. Then she shut her eyes and pretended to be asleep. I slammed the flight attendant button over her head and awkwardly crouched in the row behind so people can get past me. We'd already made a scene and clogged up boarding. As I crouched there, I realized nothing about Karen's story made sense. We weren't at the big city airport where flights sometimes get diverted. We were at the tiny regional airport that only had a couple of airlines that flew to a few major hubs. No connections happened there. There also wasn't a bunch of other people griping about missed connections, diversions, or having slept in the airport. When a tiny regional airport has that happen, you know, everybody knows, Karen was probably lying. Anyhow, the saintly flight attendant arrived to ask what was wrong. She checked my ticket. Yeah, that was unfortunately my seat. Then she asked Karen to see her and the kids' tickets. Karen kept her eyes closed and continued to pretend to be asleep. I don't know how she thought that would work, but the flight attendant shook her shoulder several times and began speaking loudly to her. You must remember, boarding is going on all around us. People were hefting bags, trying to find seats, and the usual loud mayhem. It was ridiculous. The flight attendant told Karen that if she didn't respond, paramedics would be called about an unresponsive passenger. That got Karen's attention. She popped up and demanded, "What if Trey's asleep?" And then went off on the same rant she did at me about her travel nightmare and needing the space. The flight attendant explained that it was a full flight. All of the seats were booked. Standby passengers were waiting for any extras, and Karen needed to let me sit. This sent Karen into wails over being separated from her baby by a stranger. The flight attendant pointed out that she booked the aisle on the window seats herself, leaving that separation, so she could either ask me to swap or sit in them as assigned. That sent off another rant. Apparently, some frequent flyer/travel advice site out there says to book the window and aisle and hope nobody sits in the middle so that you get a free space. I imagine this works on flights that aren't full. This one was full. Karen swore that she got that tip for how to get an extra seat free off the airline's website and threw quite a fit after they told her to do that. She was being punished by being separated from her baby. Meanwhile, the people in the row in front arrived and the mini Karen was still kicking away like she was at soccer practice. It was so bad the guy in the window seat didn't even want to sit down. He leaned over and asked the kid to stop kicking. Mini Karen let out an unholy wail of Sarah Holmes that she had apparently been trained to do if a stranger spoke to her. Karen turned from her screaming fit at the flight attendant to take in the scene of an adult man in the row in front of her, looking at her child in horror, and the child wailing Sarah Holmes at the top of her lungs, only to turn right back to the flight attendant while pointing at that dude and demanding, "Capis spell love the flight. No. That's where the flight attendant went from firm and reasonable to utterly brilliant. She sagely nodded to Karen and said, "We can't remove him from the flight because he hasn't done anything to your child, but we can certainly get you two reseated if you're not comfortable with your current location and situation. Gather your things, we'll take you up to the desk and see if there are any upgrades available for more spacious seats." It was amazing. Karen puffed up in self-importance as she gathered her now happy spawn and all their crap. She threw elbows like mad, shoving her way upstream past all the people so trying to board the plane. She'd heard the magic word upgrade, and she was gonna get there before it was gone. I sort of cursed to myself that they were probably upgrading her to make her calm down. I was not thrilled that her ridiculous display worked. Then the flight attendant's co-worker came back to ask if I preferred the window or aisle to my middle seat. Aisle, thanks. At least I got that, right? Well, it got better. The flight attendant's co-worker explained that I could relax because Karen and the entitled kid would not be returning. There were no upgrades. It was faster and easier to get them off the flight that way than calling security. They filled the seats with waiting standby passengers, and presumably Karen had plenty of space to sit next to her mini Karen in the terminal while waiting for the next flight. Well played, flight attendants. Well played. I've actually heard a lot of people talk about this strategy of getting the window seat and the aisle seat and hoping nobody will book the middle of it, but I don't know if that actually works. In this case, it didn't because the flight was full, but the Karen of the situation was really counting on it working. She's trying to say that the airline itself is the one who said to do this, which is hilarious. Not that somebody who worked for the airline told her, but that it's actually on the airline's website. So she's probably lying about that. She's probably lying about having missed her flight and having to spend the night in the airport. She's lying about pretending to be asleep as if that would make a difference if you were asleep or not. Then she calls that guy a speedo. It is very weird how that's a lot of people's go-to in a situation where they either need to get a lot of attention or they need to get out of the situation. Yeah, just point at a random person and call them a speedo. That'll take all the heat off of you. So let me know how you would have the situation down below and jerk or not a jerk and why. I was severely bullied because of my orientation, so I got revenge. I am an athletic gay guy and I always have been. I was born and raised in Texas, so you can imagine some of the going-ons in my younger years when being gay was less accepted. This was a little over 10 years ago. Freshman year, I'm on the basketball team. I'm not good, not great, just average. The team also takes up a class period, and on some days we have to study instead of practice. One of the kids on the team, M, would constantly give me crap about being gay, calling me an F slur, a queer, and all of the usual slurs. I, always being a pretty amiable guy and extremely slow to action, accepted his insults with open arms. Although I wasn't the star player among people who knew me, I made sure my nickname was the F slur. I'd always answer yes to everyone who asked, "Does booty taste good?" or "Do you have a body count?" I never let it show, but this constant disrespect towards me and other people, including teachers, really got to me. He would harass my friends, pick on the boys, catcall, and make lewd comments to the girls. He was the kind of kid who'd do a fake "yes sir" to a teacher who was getting onto him about something. That's when a little birdie told me his dad died 3 years ago and his mom was a lush, a drinker. Despite the fact that I now had this knowledge, I held on to it until I had my chance. M liked to shove people around, but he never did me because I was pretty popular and matched him physically. Like I said, that didn't stop him from picking on people close to me. I started preparing for the fight I knew would come. Working bags, learning footing, all the good stuff. After 3 months of preparation, I felt ready. He came upon me in the bathroom, talked some smack, I don't remember. There were a few of his buddies. Perfect. Remember how I said his dad died? Well, I used that and said, "Okay, daddy issues, can I call you that? Is not having one really considered a daddy issue? By the way, why are you so fixated on gay things? Why do you ask so many questions? Do you want to try it out? Or was the last thing your dad did to teach you about doming?" Admittedly, not the best as I type it out, but it was mean enough. This got him enraged. All the better. He charged at me to the narrow part of the bathroom. My back was to the wall and he was moving too fast. I got out of the way and he harmlessly flung himself against the wall. Harmlessly for him and me. Well, not for long. He had to shift his weight, I to the side. He had already done so. It was a one-punch KO to the side of the jaw. This guy had never been in a real fight before. It only took me raising a middle finger at the 3 friends that he had brought in with him to make them reconsider their dedication to the mission at hand. Next, I soccer ball kicked, shoe to face, while he was down 4 times. My shoes were smeared with blood. A few more kicks downstairs after that, spat on the back of his head, and walked away. I never talked to M again. I never cared how he was doing, but today I had seen his face and it certainly wasn't the one he had been born with. Naturally, word of the fight spread around and I got in some big trouble. I was suspended, but the motto, "Don't mess with the F slur," spread around real quick. As far as I know, nobody ever did. This is a lot more intense than I expected. Unfortunately, there are certain situations in life where you can't be passive. You have to do something in response to something happening to you, or else it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. That doesn't mean you have to go through with what he did here. There's probably other ways, but maybe you felt like there was another option and you wanted to nip it in the bud before it got even worse. Let me know how you see the situation. Do you think it was going too far, or do you think he had no other options? Let me know down below. I am breaking off my engagements because my fiance might get sick in the future. My fiance and I have been together for 5 years. He's the love of my life, and I literally can't imagine being without him. So the thought of doing this is making my stomach roll. He was adopted, and neither he nor his parents knew much about his medical history. A few weeks ago, he met his biological brother for the first time and found out that his birth father had passed from Huntington's disease. There's a 50% chance that my fiance also has the genetic defect that causes Huntington's, but he refuses to get tested. It's not the disease that I'm scared of, it's the not knowing. If we know he'll get it, we can prepare financially, practically, and emotionally. He says a positive test will hold him back from living his life, but I feel like it's the opposite. How can we live with this giant maybe looming over us? How can I make smart decisions on where to live, how to budget, or even whether or not to have biological children with this man if I'm not allowed to have all the facts? So I've come to the decision that I have to break it off. I respect his decision, but I can't understand or accept it. I have literally no one I can talk to about it because it's his secret and not mine to tell. I have to go to work now, but I'll continue to respond to questions throughout the day, especially to the comments that exactly mirror the dissenting voice in my head. I just want to clarify a few things first. Number one, I would not leave him if he was tested positive for the defect. I would not leave him if he got sick. I just want to plan for us to be able to afford the best life and care for him if he does, which means we'd have to start immediately. Number two, I don't want or need perfect children. That isn't realistic, but it is possible to avoid them being subjected to a 50-50 chance of having this disease. Of course, there are alternative options, but again, they involve preparation and planning. I'm more than willing to take a full genetic panel as well. Number three, yes, one or both of us could get cancer or permanently disabled in an accident, or any number of things, but I've come to learn that you can't plan for every unpredictable thing life throws at you. This is the rare occasion that we do have the opportunity to prepare. Number four, essentially it comes down to the fact that we are incompatible. Regardless of how much we love each other, I'm a planner and he's very laid back. Until now, these traits have complemented each other, but unfortunately they've brought us to an impasse that I don't think we can both move forward from happily. I'm floored at all these responses, supportive and otherwise. At the very least, I feel validated that this is a complex issue with no clear and obvious answer. I've decided to take a few steps back. Those of you who brought up the fact that a few weeks is probably too little time for him to fully process his possible diagnosis have a really valid point. Just because I want to immediately jump into problem-solving mode doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing to do here. So I'm not leaving yet, at least, and hopefully never. I'm going to find a therapist to help me work through my anxieties and give my fiancé some space, not literally, to work through this. And then we'll revisit this conversation, hopefully with more patience on my part and willingness to act on his. Jumping into the future, there is an update. I'm not sure if it was obvious, but I was not in a good place when I made that post. When I stress, I don't sleep or eat. For him, it may have only been a few weeks to accept the situation, but for me, it was a few weeks of non-stop anxiety, where I was lucky to get even an hour of restless sleep at night. I was plain exhausted on top of everything else, and only began to consider leaving when I started to hit my breaking point. Anyway, we talked about it at length. We cried, we fought, we researched. I showed him empathy, we consulted with friends, family, specialists. We pressed pause for days or weeks when we needed a break from the whole thing, and in the end, he agreed to have the test. Guys, to say we dodge an absolute maelstrom of bullets would be putting it mildly. He's negative for both the developing disease himself as well as the risk of passing it on. No matter what else happens, this is one area where he's assuredly safe. All of this said, once the euphoria faded, we decided that it was necessary to put a hold on our engagement and take some time apart. I still love him with all my heart, but this was our first serious disagreement as a couple, and it forced us to seriously reflect on ourselves and our relationship. Neither of our positions were wrong, but they were so disparate that there was no realistic compromise. I spent the last few months traveling abroad, and other than a few texts, we haven't spoken much, but I'm home now and we have our second first date tonight. Wish me luck. Here are the answers to a few of the final questions. Number one, I mentioned this a million times in my first post, but here goes again. I had no plans to leave him if he tested positive. I just needed to know so that we could plan our lives accordingly. Number two, we decided together to take a break. It's been an incredibly difficult, emotionally charged roller coaster of a year. I didn't leave him. Number three, we planned from day one to keep communication to a minimum. It was difficult. I actually began keeping a journal of all the things I wanted to call or text him about. It's extensive and I can't wait to share it with him. Number four, sure, I didn't give him an ultimatum, but I understand why that's the takeaway. I only said here that I was thinking of leaving, and I know that it was rash and irrational. So, was I the jerk for how I handled the situation? It seems like no matter how many times the OP here said that she would stay with him, even if he was positive, even if he did get sick, people don't really seem to hear that part. As she said many times already, she just wants to know so she can plan accordingly. I know that some people doubted that, saying that she would just find another excuse to leave once they found out that he was positive, but there's not really anything to suggest that that's what she would do. She's saying the exact opposite of that. I think it would be really tough to live under this constant looming impending doom that may or may not come. That's kind of why it's one of the most popular would you rather questions about if you could know the exact day that you would die, would you choose to know that information or would you choose not to know that information? I'll actually put that up as a poll in the community post section of the channel. Some people argue that knowing the exact day would make it so that they would live their life to the fullest, and other people argue that knowing it will hold them back from living their lives. I mean, the exact words were, he says a positive test result will hold him back from living his life, but I feel like it's the opposite. So when it comes to this specific topic, they're fundamentally in two opposing camps. I'm glad to hear that ultimately you didn't have it, but how would you have handled the situation? Let me know down below. Am I the jerk for leaving the restaurant before my boyfriend's family arrived after I was told that I was going to pay for their meals? I'm a 29-year-old female and I've been dating my boyfriend who's 35, Ricky, for 5 months. He's divorced but hates this word and goes with the word divorcee instead because the first word, divorced, makes it sound like he was dumped when it was him who initiated it. Anyways, he always goes on long rants about his exes and says stuff like, I hope you don't have this awful habit my ex has, or I hope you like X, Y, and Z because my ex didn't, and the list goes on. I found a second job recently and he's been having me pay every time we go out. When I protest, he'd say he's going through a rough patch and is seeing how much help I can offer. Last night, he invited his family to join us for dinner. We got to the restaurant first. He asked me if I brought enough money. I said, why? And he told me that he told his parents that I'd pay for their meals. I said, why would I? And he went on about his parents going through a rough patch just like him. I said, I'm sorry, this can't be a coincidence. He asked what I meant and I told him that I would not be paying. He insisted. I refused and said no. He then leaned back and said, well, you're here, so not much of a choice you have anyway. He said this while laughing like it was funny. I suddenly got up, took my phone and my purse and I walked right out. He was shocked. He started shouting after me to stop and wait, but I didn't. I went home and he called me in rage saying that I did a horrible thing walking out on him and his parents while I could have just paid. I told him that their unfortunate financial situation isn't my problem and that I wasn't obliged to pay for their food. If they couldn't pay for their meals, then they should not go out. He got offended and said, and I quote, you're making money a priority just like my ex did. Then he went on about how disrespectful my attitude was and how I made him look small in front of his parents and forced him to lie about why I wasn't there when they came. We've been going back and forth about it until now. He's mad and is refusing to speak to me until I apologize. I feel bad because his parents are lovely and I've been doing my best to keep a good relationship with them. So, am I the jerk? Right off the gate, just the fact that the boyfriend is comparing the OP to his ex-girlfriends is already pretty toxic. There's one thing to talk about it and say, hey, these things really bother me about these other people in the past, but to say you better not be like this, you better not be like that, you better be like this is not healthy at all. Really, for either side, because of the boyfriend, it creates this sort of untrue portrait of the person that he's dating, and for the girlfriend, obviously, she's in a position where she has to constantly contort herself to be what he's describing and to not be what he's describing as well. And then on top of all of that, he's trying to set her up to pay for everything, which is also weird. Let me know how you would handle this situation down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories in this series, use the playlist at the top of the description, and next time you live stream, use the cream of the crop music. Search for Cream of the Stream on Spotify or whatever music platform you use for copyright-free music to use for your stream. It's free, Cream of the Stream. Either way, thanks a lot for listening. I'll see you guys next time.